effort for the win. Yes! Yes!
Steps back. Wow. Three-pointer.
College basketball. This is March Madness.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Flop Warning on today's episode of the Women's Wednesday edition. Now, you may be wondering why we're sitting here today with a clown nose.
Don't say weird. Don't say weird.
Yeah.
Me,
No,
Owen Graham, your host.
Zion and I are not included in the clown nose tomfoolery
Zion
here.
Brown and Riley Woodall. You may be wondering why I am wearing a clown nose.
You yourself, Owen Graham.
Yeah. Well, you see, I was silly and made a bet that Ohio State was going to lose against Iowa. And
That they would win.
or they were going to win.
Yeah, that they were going to win.
But
Yeah.
But they lost.
That's
Mhm.
true.
And
By how much, Owen? By how much?
10 points.
10 points. Yeah,
Wow.
that's right.
10
That's
points. Honestly, it wasn't really close.
It wasn't that
It
close.
wasn't. No, it wasn't.
I feel like 10 was probably the closest it got for most of the second
Yeah.
half.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, just for context, that's why I might be looking a little strange to some of you viewers at home. But anyways, we're back. Other than that, it's a very positive day. We're
Mhm.
ready to talk about some women's basketball. It's an exciting time.
It's March,
It's
man.
an exciting
Mhm.
time. It's March.
Finally.
And we're going to get into it straight here. We're going to go to the game that I lost my bet on, and I'll go ahead and kick it to Riley. Riley, Ohio State at Iowa.
Yeah.
Iowa takes it by 10. What do you got?
Well, first of all, I want to say a message to all the kids out there: don't gamble. You just learned that lesson from seeing what happened with my good pal Owen over here. But yeah, this is a game that everybody kind of had circled on their calendars for the end of the season. Ohio State, Iowa, and Indiana, the three top teams in the Big Ten. Ohio State still ended up winning, like not the game, but the regular season title, obviously, because they were a couple games ahead of Iowa. But Iowa wins by 10, 93-83 in Carver Hawkeye. That ends a 15-game winning streak for the Buckeyes. Caitlin Clark becomes the NCAA all-time leading scorer, passing pistol Pete Maravich, 35 points, 6 rebounds, 9 of 6. 9 of 10 from the free throw line. A couple of those free throws tied and took the record from Pistol Pete. Hannah Stolke, 23 points as well. Ohio State, JC Sheldon, 24 points, 9 assists. And that's kind of where it ends for the Buckeyes, guys. I mean, they had, they had 4 other players in double figures, but JC Sheldon had 24. Cody McMahon only with 10 points, 5 rebounds. That's kind of an off night for her.
Yeah.
I'll get to that later in the pod. Miguel Ashikova, 14 points. Theory with 11. Taylor with 10. So this is kind of interesting heading into Big Ten tournament time, obviously. But I would like to just see the records of these three teams. I believe Iowa has only lost 1 game inside Carver Hawkeye this season, and that was to Kansas State. Indiana did not lose a single home game this season, and Ohio State, I believe, was also undefeated at home, if I'm not mistaken. We can double check on that.
I'll do that.
But yeah, these three teams, it's just so hard to win on the road against these three top teams in the Big Ten. They're all so good, and it's definitely going to be exciting to see how all of them do in the Big Ten tournament.
So Ohio State did lose on December 18th. They lost to UCLA. at
Okay.
home.
It was UCLA, but
that was their only home
it was
loss.
a one loss.
Yeah. And that's a good UCLA team. So that's a
great.
loss.
They're
then.
probably, depending on what happens this week, that team might be
So
one
against
seed. So.
against Big Ten opponents, both Indiana, Iowa, and Ohio State are all undefeated at home. So
I personally think that Stolke is going to be huge. I think for that Iowa team, if they want to make it deep, and I think you kind of saw it with Indiana. I think she struggled. I don't really know her final point total on that one, but it was not a lot. So I think if she's efficient from the day, like you said, 9 of 12 from the field and double figure points, that's going to tell you how the Iowa team is going to play that game. Because I think, outside of Caitlin Clark, the supporting staff hasn't, done the best, but Stolke's been there to provide a lot of scoring, and I think that's pretty big.
Stolke had 10 points and 6 rebounds against Indiana.
So, I mean,
you want more from her.
Definitely.
Especially in
But
games like
you
that.
want to talk about a player that stepped up after they lost Monica Sanano last year. I mean, come on.
Absolutely.
Like you lose a veteran player like that down in the post. Hannah Stolke has been phenomenal this season. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. Well, we'll go to our next game now, heading to Texas at Oklahoma. Oklahoma wins a tight one by 1 point, actually. Oklahoma takes that one at home against a very good Texas team. Zion, do you want to take that one, or do you want me to take it?
I'll talk about it.
Okay.
I mean, Oklahoma is now the back-to-back Big 12 regular season champions.
That's
And
tough.
this whole year, it's been like Texas is the best team in the Big 12, and it felt like they were playing catch-up. I think I shouted out Texas a couple weeks ago on this show, and I was like, I think when they play Oklahoma again, they're going to get them and win the Big 12. I was wrong. Maybe I should be wearing a clown nose too.
Zion, I think you're looking at me trying not to laugh. I think that's what's going on right now. Can you take me seriously right now?
I got you. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's the nature of the beast being a sports media person is you have to live and die on your takes sometimes.
That's true. And then Oklahoma, of course, they won that big game and lost to Kansas State a few days, or Kansas, not even Kansas State,
Yeah.
Kansas a few days later. So crazy stuff in the Big 12. But I got to shout out this Oklahoma program because even though all season long we've looked at Texas as the team to beat in that conference, they went in, they won at Texas, then won again when Texas came back to Norman. And obviously these two teams going to the SEC next year, that should be interesting. But shout out to the Sooners. Peyton Verhulst had 18 points in this game. Lexi Keys had another 16. She drilled 4 threes, and they held Texas to 10 points in the fourth quarter to get that one done and win it by 1. So shout out to the Sooners. I know conference standings aren't always everything when the committee's looking at things and whatnot, but it still feels good to be able to say you're going to be able to hang a conference championship banner, even when you're not going to be in that conference next year.
Yeah. Well, I think it's that 10 points in the fourth quarter. That's tough, especially when you're in crunch time against at Oklahoma. You're in a tough environment, of course. The last final regular season, one of the final regular season games of the year, and if you're Texas, you got to perform in that time, and kind of disappeared in that. But credit to Oklahoma's defense, as you said. Moving on to the Pac-12 now, USC at Arizona. This one was crazy. This one was insane because USC took it in double overtime, but Juju Watkins, the freshman that we love to talk about on the show, she actually fouled out in 32 minutes. I think she fouled out in regulation pretty early on in the second half, but somehow they still pulled out the win. Raya Marshall ended that one with 26 points and 11 rebounds as well. Arizona, I mean, they had a pretty good game too with them, and 5 players in double figures. Led by Puyo with 21 points and 9 rebounds. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. It's kind of a tough one to make. But, Arizona, they missed a prime opportunity to improve that bubble status. They're kind of on that edge of being in the tournament, being out. ESPN's Charlie Krem has them at next 4 out. So, that's a tough loss, especially with that big of an opportunity. And when USC is down their best player and you can't convert in the later minutes, it's tough. It's tough for them.
Well, I think it also kind of speaks to the character of this USC team is because, whenever you hear about the Trojans, it's Juju Watkins, right? But when they didn't have their best player, USC still found a way to win on the road, by the way. That was at Arizona, and we know how tough it is to win on the road. So I think that speaks volumes for this team in terms of a depth perspective and other players stepping up. That's what they're going to need if they want to win the Pac-12 tournament and make a deep run in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, and I want to speak on this. I caught the 2 overtimes in this game. I didn't really watch much of regulation, but I want to speak on this from Arizona's perspective. I mean, it is a big missed opportunity.
Yeah.
They're going to have to win some games here in the Pac-12 tournament, which we'll talk about. But they're going to have to win some games in that, I think, to actually be in the NCAA tournament. Of course, this team a few years ago was in the national championship and lost to Stanford. But they were there. They had so many moments in both overtimes. They had the lead with about 90 seconds or 2 minutes left. And the first overtime, they let USC get back and tie it up again. In the second overtime, USC took the lead and ended up winning the game. But it's one of those that they'll look at, and when they're the number 1 seed or number 2 seed in the NIT, they'll look at it and say, we wish you would have had that one back.
How to capitalize. Well, moving on to our next segment of the day, flop of the week. We recognize a team or maybe a player that had underperformed on the week. And Riley, we'll start it off to you. You've got some exclamation points in your notes, so go ahead.
Well, I just get fired up about this sometimes, and you guys will find out why in just a couple seconds. But I'm going with Kansas State this week just because they lost to Iowa State 82-76 at home! Exclamation point! Exclamation point! Exclamation point! That puts Kansas State now 5-5 in their last 10 games. They're 3-3 in their last 6. The last time they beat a ranked opponent, granted they don't have very many on their schedule after this game, but still, last time they beat a ranked opponent was January 22nd, about 2 months ago at Baylor. Here's what fires me up. You take a look at the rebounds. Iowa State on the road out-rebounded Kansas State at home 47-30. That's just out-toughing a team.
Yeah.
That's just wanting it more. Iowa State wanted to win that game much more than Kansas State did.
Yeah.
13-7 on the offensive side. That's just like my interpretation of the stats, right? Iowa State won that game and they still had 16 turnovers. Kansas State had 10, but Iowa State had 16 turnovers.
And they won by 6.
And they won by 6, and they out-rebounded Kansas State by 17 on the glass. Kansas State, by the way, 11 threes. Iowa State, 5.
Wow.
So to me, when I look at this game, I if you lose at home to a team that like plays really well, like Iowa State's a pretty solid team, right? Like that's not what fires me up. What fires me up is the things that you can correct and put a little bit more effort into. Like, you can't teach effort. Effort just has to be there, especially at this time in the season. And when you're getting out-rebounded by a team that you've already lost to in the season, by the way, they lost to Iowa State at Iowa State. You're getting out-rebounded by 17 on your home court. To me, that's an effort problem, and that's something that they're going to have to figure out as they go into the conference tournament.
Everything is starting to unravel for this Kansas State team. At the end of January, this was the second-ranked team in the country.
Yep.
And you mentioned it, 5-5 in the last 10 since then. They have just fallen apart. And, they've got to course correct here, whether it's this week in the Big 12 tournament or whether it's just that, the great thing about women's basketball, you do have that full week off in between the conference tournament and the NCAA tournament. So somewhere in there, they got to get it right and figure out how they can go back to what they were at the beginning of the season when we look at this team as a top 5 team, because they're certainly not that right now.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, Zion, I'll go right back to you for your flop of the week. I have a little bit to say on this team, but I'll let you take most of the thunder because I also have a second team. So who do you got?
So I'm going with Virginia Tech. Once again, maybe I should be wearing the clown nose because earlier in February, I came on here twice, not once, but twice, and really big up to Virginia Tech and said, hey, we should be talking about this team that was in the Final Four last year a lot more than we do. And last week was just not a great week for them. They lost by 13 at Notre Dame on Thursday. That was a great game. Hannah Hidalgo, just a dog.
Ridiculous.
She is insane.
More on her later.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad somebody's going to talk about her. But that was a great game to watch, and Notre Dame did what they needed to do at home. But then to go on to Virginia on Sunday and lose that game, it's a rivalry game, last game of the regular season. That's tough. And, of course, the big story is Liz Kitley, who yesterday was named ACC Player of the Year for the 3rd straight season, but she went down in the 3rd quarter with that injury. That was kind of the theme on Sunday. You had her, you had Mackenzie Holmes and Lily Meister for IU, you had Molly Davis at Iowa, had a lot of players, a lot of seniors at that, going down and having these injuries now where we don't know when or if they'll return. So it'll be tough for them. I don't know if she'll be out for a long time, what the synopsis is, but I just don't think they can reach their full potential, which to me is still a national championship. But I just don't know if they can really do that without her. You saw kind of how their defense struggled after she went out of that game. Yeah. And just all things considered, obviously the Liz Kitley injury isn't anything that anybody could control.
Yeah.
But all things considered, they're my flop of the week. Just not a good week for the Hokies.
Real quick. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, a couple quick points. First of all, I really hope Liz Kitley is able to play the rest of this season, or at least come back for a couple tournament games, because she's such a special player. And you're absolutely right. This VT team is nowhere even close without her on the court. And that's just facts. The other thing that I'll point out here is I think you need to give yourself a little bit more credit, Zion, because when you came on the show and really hyping up Virginia Tech, you were correct, right? Like, I don't think you need to be wearing the clown nose for this one because this VT team was really, really good. Oh, and you still need to be wearing the clown nose. But Zion, you're clean. Just because, like, I agreed with you, and I think a lot of people would agree with you as well. They're just kind of doing the Kansas State thing right now, which is kind of losing at the time where you shouldn't really be losing.
You know, I'll give the Hokies some credit though. They did win the ACC.
Yeah.
They did clinch it against NC State, Syracuse, Notre Dame, Louisville, all ranked teams, and that's a tough conference. But you know, Zion, to go off of you, and this is kind of leading into my flop warning. It's 2 games that it's definitely a red flag, because if you're gonna collapse and if you can't play with that depth with however long Kitley is down with an injury, then it's going to be worrisome, and your team's not maybe going to be the most prepared that they should be for the national tournament. But I also have to go back on my flop of the week last week and continue to talk about this Colorado team. I think it's just been a downward spiral of a lot of bad things. And to give them credit, it's a tough conference in the Pac-12, but you can't lose an easy one against Michigan State, or it's not Michigan State, Washington State in the final few games of the season. Like, I don't see that this team is really prepared and really like fired up to actually go play in postseason. Like, it just doesn't seem that way. It's all directed towards momentum for me. I just think they're not going the right direction, and it's just not good for tourney time. They lost 5 of their last 6. Granted, a lot of those were ranked opponents, but Washington State at home, that's an embarrassing loss.
So you're doubling down. You put them in the ground last week. Now you got the shovel ready and digging the dirt on top.
I'm keeping it safe with this thing on my nose right now, but I have to keep it safe. But now that we've talked about the negatives, we always have to end on a positive note, and that leads to our fab of the week. We recognize a player or team that overperformed or just performed well with their dominance as well for this week. So I went to Riley last time first. Zion, you're up first. Who do you got?
I just talked about them briefly. I'm going to go with the Kansas Jayhawks. This team, what they have done since the end of January, has been special. They were 10-10 on January 27th when they lost to Oklahoma. And since then, they are 8-1, and they are firmly a tournament team. I don't think, even if they lost their first game this week in the Big 12 tournament, I don't think they can do anything now to be on the wrong side of the NCAA tournament. If you didn't see, they won by 9 against Oklahoma, got their revenge on the Sooners, 83-74 on Saturday after a game on Wednesday, a close one that they eked out against UCF. But this team out of nowhere, just came up. They're kind of, the opposite of Kansas State in that Big 12 conference, where Kansas State was the team we looked at early on, and now those 2 teams have kind of flipped the way their positioning has gone going into the tournament time. So this team, like I said, they are really good. Samaya Nichols, shout out to her. She's averaging 17 during this stretch and had 29 against Oklahoma in that big win. The Jayhawks, I mean, when you look at a team that can just go on a run like that can win 8 of 9, and the only loss, I believe, was to Baylor, a really good team. So there's nothing to be ashamed about when you lose to Baylor.
And that one was on the road, too.
There we go. So, I mean, shout out to Kansas for being a 500 team on January 27th and then turning around and saying, we're going to just be great the rest of the season.
And it's the perfect time to do it, especially with how much momentum they're gaining towards March. We'll have to see. I know, Riley, you're a big person on this. If that momentum starts to dwindle down as you get later into that season and as you're kind of getting tired and maybe fatigued. But Zion, like you said, I mean, even if they lose that first game in that conference tournament, I think I would agree with you that they deserve a spot. They deserve a spot for sure. Riley, I'll go to you next. Who is your fab of the week?
Oh, give me the Fighting Irish, man. Give me Notre Dame. They're coming off a revenge win against Louisville where they won by 16 points. Mind you, they lost to Louisville, like I said, earlier in the season. Beat them by 16 points. This is a team that's had some really big wins, some really close losses, but namely a big upset win at UConn. And UConn, as we know, is a very, very tough team this season. They're also riding a 5-game win streak heading into the playoffs. So this is like my fab of the week is like Notre Dame comboed with Hannah Hidalgo. And 26 points against Louisville, 8 rebounds, right? This is a player that is so incredibly special that I would argue is top 3, if not the best point guard in women's basketball this season, this year. I'll put her up there.
Not a point guard to you?
I mean, like she plays that role. She's like much more like the distributor, moves around quite a bit. She brings the ball up the court, like things like that.
Is the Iowa Hawkeyes.
Yeah, exactly. But Hannah Hidalgo is she's not Notre Dame, but she elevates this team so much. And just her ability not only to score points, but also distribute the ball, get it to places, get it to her playmakers. I just really like the way that she plays, and she's going to be the X factor, in my opinion, for the Fighting Irish as they head into conference tournament time and into the NCAA tournament. She, along with this Notre Dame team, are dangerous, and I would not want to play them in the NCAA tournament just because they're capable of scoring and scoring very fast, and they're hitting their stride at the right time.
Every time I watch Notre Dame, and I watched that game against Virginia Tech on Thursday, I believe, I think about what this team would be with Olivia Miles, who, of course, is going to miss. She's still going to be out the whole season with her injury that she suffered I think it was right around this time last year, the ACC tournament. But, I mean, that was a player that last season was a first-team all-ACC level player. And, unfortunately, they don't have her. But with her, I'm not sure if I'm ready to say this team can win a national championship. I just don't think they have enough firepower. But if they had her, I would say that. And guess what? She'll be back next year. So, next year, you assume they'll have Olivia Miles to go along with Hannah Hidalgo. And who knows what they'll do then.
Well, I was going to say, too, that, like, even if they're not national championship worthy this year, like you mentioned, I could totally see them making a run to the Elite Eight, potentially the Sweet 16, the Elite Eight. Maybe if they pull off a couple tricks out of the hat, they'll be able to make it to the Final Four. But I think this is definitely a team that can at least make Sweet 16, maybe the Elite Eight.
Let me tell you about a team that goes under the radar. Unfortunately, we won't do our mid-major.
In all caps,
Our mid-major segment will not be on our podcast episode today because we're going to take a look at our Big Six conference tournament. But again, a team that I recognized last year, the Fairfield Stags, man. The Fairfield Stags ranked number 25 in the AP poll this week after putting a resume on Twitter, like a LinkedIn resume, and it was amazing. It was great. The first ranking in program history. They're undefeated in conference in the regular season. They've only lost one game the entire year, and that was at Vanderbilt, which Vanderbilt is kind of, again, on that bubble between in and out of the tournament. Only lost to them by 3 at Vanderbilt. So, I mean, it's just dominance. It's dominance throughout the regular season, and it's dominance throughout conference. I'm not, I can't say that I'm going to see this team maybe in the Sweet 16 or Elite 8, but
I was going to say,
you have got to give, you have got to give them credit for the record. The schedule, it's fairly easy, but it's not, it's not every day that you get to just, go undefeated in conference unless you're South Carolina.
Right. So shout out to them. You can only play the games you play.
Yeah.
And they have won all of them except for one.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. However,
no, my clown nose fell off.
However, that schedule that they do play,
gosh,
it's just, I understand why they just now got ranked. When you look at that schedule, it's just not a lot of good teams. No disrespect to the MAC, as I like to call it, the MAC with 2 A's. But it's just not it. The competition they've gone against this year is not great, and I'd be curious to see. Not that I'm rooting for this, because I'm not. If they lost this week, If they lost this week, Owen, I don't think this team would be in the field of 68.
Yeah, I mean, the strength of schedule is tough.
However,
it's tough.
Committee, if you're listening, if they do win, they'll probably be a 13 seed. Gonzaga's probably be a 4 seed. Do not make that a game. Do not put 2 of the best mid-majors and have one of them immediately have to go out in the first round. NCAA. Do not do that. Put Fairfield against another 4 seed, IU or something, whoever you want. Do not make them play Gonzaga if they do make the tournament.
I agree.
Yeah, I don't know, though. I would be worried if I were the Hoosier fans and the Fairfield Stags came in. I'm just kidding.
We playing this game at Fairfield?
Ultimately, just the recognition of ranked for the first time in program history.
Yeah.
Gets myself a Fab of the Week. I think that's the only thing you really have to point out, but the
It
resume is
speaks
good.
to the hard work that's being done behind the scenes, right? When
Exactly.
you have a program that you're having to dig and build from the ground up, to have them ranked for the first time ever is quite remarkable.
Right. Yeah. So this is our next segment. This is not usually on the podcast, but since it's March, I mean, we got to put this one on. And this is the week. This is the week that all of these are going on. We are going to take all of our conference tournaments, the Big Six, as we'll call it, or Power Six, whatever you'd like to call it, and give our own picks for who we like in this to make it far, and then maybe provide a winner for each. We'll go ahead and do that. We'll start off with the Big East, and I'll leave the floor open to you guys. Whoever wants to start. I mean, just
it doesn't matter to me,
for
Zion. You want to go first? I'll go ahead. Go ahead.
Sure. So the Big East.
Is anyone willing to wager a clown nose for it?
No.
Just so okay.
No.
No, I'm not doing it.
All right, fine.
UConn and Creighton have been the best two teams in the Big East all season long, and UConn has blown out Creighton both times they played.
Yeah.
So the semifinal, I think it'll be the 1 seed UConn against the 5 seed Marquette, the 2 seed Creighton versus the 3 seed St. John's. I think UConn and Creighton do advance, and once again, a lot of people say you don't want to play the same team 3 times, or it's hard to beat it. What is it? It's hard to beat a team 3 times.
Yeah,
I just don't think that's as true as people think it is. I think UConn wins the Big East tournament over Creighton.
I mean, you pretty much covered all the bases there. 18-0 in conference. They don't have a single conference loss this season. Do UConn? They only have 5 losses. They're riding a win streak of 8 heading into this tournament as well. Namely, their last game, 65-42 win over Providence at Providence. This team is stacked with talent. You've got Aaliyah Edwards, you've got KK Arnold, you've got Paige Beckers. This is a team that's probably one of the most complete teams we've seen this season. I think the best probably being South Carolina. But yeah, UConn's hunting to make a big run in the NCAA tournament and potentially knock off a couple of those really top teams. They're gunning for South Carolina, I think. So yeah, it's going to be so tough to beat the Huskies. They're my pick to win the tournament as well.
Yeah, UConn's not losing. I mean, I'm just, it's point simple. They're not losing. I think I'll go ahead and be different from Zion. I'll put Villanova in UConn in the semifinals. I think it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4. I honestly think it'll just be 1, 2, 3, 4 across the board. 1, 2 in the final. UConn takes it. I just don't really see a lot of upset factor. I mean, the Marquette is probably the closest one. I don't have a lot of faith in St. John's. Creighton's good, but they're not on UConn's level. I just have it straight from rankings. 1, 2, 3, 4. UConn takes it. Moving on to the Big 12 bracket. We've got a few interesting ones. The bracket designs are always so hard to follow sometimes. But
I hate this.
It's just all over the place. But Oklahoma, of course, takes the conference. They're number 1. Texas, number 2. Iowa State above Oklahoma, number 4. And then Kansas State at number 3. Any big surprises here? I know, Zion, you talked a little bit about Kansas. Could they make a run? What do you think?
I think Kansas will beat BYU in the second round, their first game. But as well as they have played, I don't see them beating Texas.
Yeah.
So I do think they'll lose there. But for my semifinal, I do have one surprise team.
Okay.
I think we will see Baylor from the 5 seed beating Iowa State, which isn't even crazy.
I like that one.
Okay.
But that's not. Hey, it gets crazier, Riley.
I like that
man.
one. I like that one.
I'm buckled up.
I like that one.
I believe Baylor will be playing not Oklahoma. I believe they'll be playing TCU, the 9 seed, in the semifinal of the Big 12 championship.
Wow.
I got to give Oklahoma their props. They've had a great regular season, but I don't think this team is unbeatable, as we just saw. They just lost to Kansas. So I think it'll be Baylor, TCU on one side, the 2 and the 3, Texas and Kansas State on the other side. And I think Texas and Baylor advance after that. And I do think the Longhorns, I just talked for about 5 minutes about how they weren't necessarily the best team in the conference like we thought they were.
Yeah.
I think they proved this week that at the very least they are a top 2 team in the conference. I think Texas takes the Big 12 this year.
I really like that Baylor pick. I'm not gonna lie. I'm looking at that one too. I'm really starting to look at that Baylor and Iowa State game, and I think Baylor takes it. I'm not gonna. I think I have Baylor. I don't have TCU. overcoming Oklahoma. I have Baylor, Oklahoma. I'll put in Texas, and then I think Kansas State. I will take a little bit of a different route, though. I will take Kansas State over Texas. I think they might have a bounce.
So they're gonna start winning games again.
They might have a little bounce back.
Hey,
and
you have more
take
faith
one,
than I.
Take one over the Longhorns, and then I'll put Oklahoma to beat Baylor. That one's tough though. You made a really good argument there, Zion.
That'll be a good game if it happens.
I'll take Oklahoma by a few points, and then you know what? Give me Kansas State to win.
No.
Give me Kansas State to win.
Man.
They are going to prove that number 2 ranking was not a fraud, and they are going to come back, get it. They're going to take it. I have confidence. Not enough to put a wager on Clownos, but I'm gonna take Kansas State.
Well, real quickly, because I know we got to move on. So I'll go back to the Baylor Iowa State game. I think Iowa State's actually going to beat Baylor. Iowa State beat Baylor earlier on this season. In terms of the Iowa State Oklahoma matchup, that's going to be a really tough matchup for Iowa State, especially if we're talking about the fact that Oklahoma beat them by 14 points at Iowa State. So that's not a good sign if you're an Iowa State fan. However, anything can happen in the tournament. I still think OU beats Iowa State. If we go to the bottom half, Texas, Kansas State, Texas does it, and then Texas OU. I'm actually going to say give me the Longhorns in that one. Okay. I think they're gonna pull it off over Oklahoma.
Okay, so 2 Longhorns
we got
and a
Texas
Wildcat.
and Kansas State. All right,
2 Longhorns and a Wildcat. Moving on.
None of us picked Oklahoma.
Yeah,
none of us picked Oklahoma.
It's a little shocker, but
yeah,
it's a tough one. Moving on. SEC: South Carolina, Alabama, LSU, and Ole Miss. Your top 4. Any surprises here? Vanderbilt, maybe. No. I'm gonna go ahead and start this one out. South Carolina. No, I was thinking the Vanderbilt and Ole Miss game.
Okay,
I was
before he goes, I'm gonna say my whole bracket. I do have Vanderbilt in my semifinal. Okay,
wow.
Maybe I'm crazy.
Yeah,
continue.
It wasn't that crazy. If Zion's got it, then it's not that crazy.
I might just be an idiot though. Who knows?
I can't willingly say that South Carolina is losing a game, so
No.
I'm just gonna pick them as the winners.
No.
I don't really care who's in the semifinals, to be honest. I think South Carolina. I think LSU it could be in the final. I think they could give them a run for their money, but I take South Carolina winning it. That's me. I know it's the easy pick, but go ahead.
I'm right there with you. I think it'll be South Carolina versus Alabama at the top of this bracket in the semi. And as I said, Vanderbilt will play LSU. I think we get chalk here, 1 versus 2, South Carolina versus LSU. And I could definitely see the Tigers giving them another close game like we saw, I believe that was late January, maybe early February, somewhere in there. I could definitely see that happening. But
late January, you got it. Yeah.
But the Gamecocks are just so good. And a couple of years ago, of course, they went undefeated in the regular season, and then they lost to Kentucky in the SEC championship game. So maybe that happens again, but I just don't see it. So I think the Gamecocks go to, what would that be, 32-0 and win that game.
Yeah. So real quick, a couple of points. I agree with you. It's going to be a sweep for South Carolina. This is one of the best teams that we've seen in a long, long time in women's basketball. They're so talk about that later. They're so complete in so many different ways. And 29-0. They haven't lost a conference game. They're 12-0 on the road too. That's just something I want to bring up in terms of the LSU game. They played that LSU game at LSU, and the Tigers almost did it, but South Carolina still won by 6 points. I just don't see any way that LSU is going to pull it off. South Carolina, I believe, is very, very ticked off with how last season happened, and they lost to Iowa in that semifinal. And it's a revenge season for the Gamecocks this year, and there's very few teams that I think are tailored to beat South Carolina this season. LSU, in my opinion, is not one of them. Not right now.
Okay. So then we'll move on to the ACC, and we've got a really good bracket. This is where it starts to get hard, in my opinion. This is where it starts to get a little challenging because you can make a case for a lot of these teams. I am going to go ahead. I don't believe in Virginia Tech that much. I will say that much.
Not without Kitley.
I don't, especially without Kitley. I think Notre Dame gets themselves into the semifinal at the top. Louisville is obviously a hard one to to look at and say, nah, we'll just gloss over it and give Notre Dame the win. But give me a North Carolina upset against Virginia Tech and put Notre Dame and North Carolina at the top of the bracket. I like that North Carolina team. I think they can make a little noise. I like Duke, but I don't think they go over NC State. I like Syracuse. I might be a little different here, but also give me Syracuse to beat NC State. Give me a Notre Dame and Syracuse final.
So you got chaos in the ACC.
Yeah, I've got chaos.
All right,
I think it's too easy to just pick. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Mm-hmm.
Give me Notre Dame over Syracuse to take the ACC. That's mine.
You're picking Notre Dame to win the ACC championship?
Picking Notre Dame.
Well, same here, man.
Well, there you go. There you go.
Well,
not that different.
I want to talk about a couple things here. Virginia Tech on a 2-game losing streak heading into the tournament, and they lose Kitley. So that's a tough loss for them. So I don't think they can do it. They don't have the firepower. Notre Dame's riding a 5-game win streak heading into this tournament, and they're seeded really, really well. They're most likely going to face a Louisville team that they just beat. They'll probably maybe face Virginia Tech. We'll see.
Not according to Owen.
Yeah,
I like that North Carolina.
Yeah, North Carolina's really good. I don't know.
It's probably the best 8 seed in the
brackets.
Absolutely.
I still think somehow Virginia Tech's going to pull it off just because UNC is not as good as Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame's going to upset Virginia Tech. They'll be in the championship to the bottom. Give me NC State and Florida State in the semifinal.
Okay.
NC State wins it, and then Notre Dame upsets NC State.
Okay.
So we all have Notre Dame in the championship.
Nice.
I do think Virginia Tech will be good enough to win that game, presumably against North Carolina. So I'll say it'll be Notre Dame versus Virginia Tech, and I think the Irish take that for the second week in a row. And then on the bottom, I do think Florida State is going to win their first game and then upset Syracuse to play North Carolina State in that semifinal. So I think Florida State's a good team. I mean, this is the one bracket, maybe the Pac-12 a little bit too. You could pick 6, maybe 7 teams to win this bracket, and I wouldn't think you were crazy. Yeah, honestly,
it took me a lot to not make me put Duke over NC State as well. I think that Duke team is also on an upward trajectory. But
I have after that I have NC State beating Florida State, and while I have Notre Dame in the championship, I do think they fall in the final to North Carolina State. I think they get it done there. Yeah. Number 2 seed in the whole bracket. I do think Notre Dame will finally lose a game after making it all the way to that championship.
So then we will bring it to a conference that we're a bit more familiar with, the Big Ten. This is also another one that you can make a few maybe surprising picks, but it's either you go surprise or you go all the way with the top teams. I'll go ahead and let one of you guys go first because I've been stealing the thunder. So Riley, I'll go with you first.
So when I first saw this bracket, I took a long, hard look at it because Ohio State, Iowa, Indiana, right? Like, in my opinion, it's going to be one of those 3. I don't think there's another Big Ten team that's good enough to win it this season. So I'll start at the top half. I just don't see, unless Ohio State runs into Illinois, which they will. I don't think Maryland's going to beat Illinois. Maryland's down this season. So Illinois is going to hop into that game versus Ohio State. That's going to be a tough one for the Buckeyes because Illinois has proven that they can be a very dangerous team this season. I still think the Buckeyes are going to get it done. They'll be in the semifinal and take on Michigan State. The Buckeyes will win that one. They'll be in the final. The bottom half of the bracket is going to be crazy. So bear with me here. All right. Okay. And I will go in and go for broke on this one and say that if I'm wrong about this, I will wear a clown nose.
Whoa.
I will do it. I will do it. Okay.
Is this just like our brand now? Is that
it is
the clown noses?
Yeah. Indiana in the semifinal.
Okay.
Yep.
Penn State beats Wisconsin.
Where is this going?
You don't say it.
Nittany Lions upset the Hawkeyes.
And
I will put a clown nose on that. You guys are going to think I am insane, but I think that game, if the Nittany Lions play like they are capable of playing, that's going to be a lot closer than people think it's actually going to be. I'm taking the Nittany Lions over the Hawkeyes, and I will live and die on that hill, and I will wear a clown nose once this tournament comes to a close. Indiana's going to beat Penn State. They'll be in the championship against Ohio State. and the Hoosiers get the revenge win and win the Big Ten tournament.
All right.
I've
got a
There's
lot before I even give my
You're
picks.
stressing me out,
I've
Riley.
got to do a little one-on-one here with Riley.
Yeah.
So first and foremost,
Mhm.
with IU winning it, that means you believe. I hope this means you believe that Mackenzie Holmes is healthy enough to play this weekend.
Correct.
Okay.
I do.
I don't know. I seriously have no clue. So that at least makes sense there.
That changes my pick if she's not healthy to play.
Of course.
This weekend. Yeah.
Penn State, man, look. They gave Iowa a great game about a month ago. That was when Hannah Stokey scored 47, and Caitlin Clark, I think, had 15 assists and 12 turnovers. It was a really weird game.
Yep.
But they don't have any defense on that team.
I know.
And you're playing Iowa.
I know. No, I know.
It's basically a shootout from there, and you have to.
And you think Penn State. And by the way, it's in Minneapolis. No disrespect to Penn State fans. This is basically going to be a Penn State road game.
Yeah.
There's Iowa fans all over the country now.
And that's what it's only
so.
a couple hours to get from Iowa City to Minneapolis. So they're going to have the most fans here of any of these teams, I believe. So I don't know. Hey, you put your nose on the line.
I like it. Okay,
I'm putting my nose on the line.
Here's
Here's the reason why, though, is like I understand about the whole like it's kind of basically a Penn State road game. I agree with you on that. Like Iowa's gonna have more fans there, but I don't know. Like I told you, I looked at this bracket for a long time, and when I saw Iowa and the potential matchup of Penn State, something in me was telling me not to just pick Iowa immediately off that. I don't know what it is. Maybe divine intervention. I don't know.
All right. Well, we'll see. I'll pick mine quickly here. I think Ohio State and Nebraska make the semifinal. Nebraska, they can beat Michigan State in that one in the quarterfinal game. I do think Iowa and IU both make it on the other side. I'm going to take Iowa to advance because I don't know what's going on with Mackenzie Holmes and Willie Meister. And I'll take Ohio State to advance. They get a third game to settle it all. And I think the Buckeyes this time take it a week after losing to Iowa at Iowa. I think they will be able to beat them in Minneapolis and win the Big Ten tournament.
Okay. I'm still trying to process Riley's, but that one sounded good. Is Purdue being a 12 seed? That's right.
I mean, they struggled a lot during the end of the season.
Yeah.
Now Caitlin Harper's out for the year. Unfortunately.
Okay.
Now Northwestern is bad. If they don't beat Northwestern, that would not be great.
Northwestern is not
garbage.
I will take Ohio State and I'll go with Michigan State. I think they're a competitive team. They like to be physical. They made a little bit of a surprising run last season and almost beat the Hoosiers. That one came down to the wire. But I will go with Iowa. I'll take the Hoosiers. I'll take the Hoosiers. I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4 in this one. I'll go Ohio State wins the top. Give me Indiana over Iowa.
Yes, sir.
And I think Ohio State's pressure caused a lot of issues for Indiana. I got to give it to the Buckeyes. To win in the Big Ten. Now, this one's going to be fun. This one's going to be all over the place.
I hate that all these games besides the championship are on the Pac-12 network.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
It is.
Well, Zion, go ahead and give us your picks for the Pac-12.
All right, here. So I'll go with Stanford, the number 1 seed, to make the semifinal.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they will be playing Colorado. I think Colorado slightly gets back on track this week. They win the first game against Oregon, then they go ahead and beat Oregon State in the quarterfinal. So that'll be the first semifinal, Oregon State, or Colorado rather, and Stanford. And then in the bottom, I'll go with the 2 and the 3, the 2 LA schools, USC and UCLA. We just saw Arizona give USC a tight game. I could see it being tight again, but Juju Watkins doesn't foul out. I think USC should be fine in that one. And Utah is slipping quite a bit. Even if they do beat Arizona State in that 6-11 matchup, I don't think they can beat UCLA. So I'll go with those 2 at the bottom. And then I think USC will beat UCLA. That one to me was a coin flip, really. Like these teams are all so good. I don't have any rhyme or reason why the USC will win that game, but I think they do. And I do think Stanford is a little bit better than Colorado, and they'll win that one. And I am going to go with Stanford in a tight one, beating USC in the Pac-12 championship. Of course, we saw Juju Watkins have her 51-point game against Stanford earlier this season. I don't think that Cardinal team, Tara Vanderbilt, they pride themselves on defense. They're not going to let that happen again.
Yeah.
I think they win the Pac-12 championship.
Riley, I'll go to you next.
All right, so I got another couple crazy picks for you, gentlemen. I'm not putting the nose on the line this one because I feel like that'd be weird to wear like two of them at the same time. Top half of the bracket, Stanford in the semifinal. I'm actually going to go with Oregon State. I think Colorado's slipping a little bit too much right now, and I don't trust them enough to make it to the semifinal. Bottom half, two LA schools, like Zion said, USC, UCLA. UCLA beats USC, a little bit of an upset. They make it to the championship. They play Stanford, and I get it. I know they lost to Stanford by 20 points, I believe.
I think it was 20. They got destroyed in that game.
Destroyed in that game. I get it. It's going to be a little bit closer. I think it's going to be within a few points. I still don't have it in me enough to put UCLA over Stanford. So I'm going to say Stanford wins this one, but it's going to be a lot closer than people think it is.
I'll go ahead and start at the bottom. Give me Utah making the semifinals.
Wow. So you think they beat Arizona State and UCLA?
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
Yes. 100% yes. USC making it with the semifinals there. Top half. I'll have a little first round upset with Oregon over Colorado. I gotta stick with the downward trajectory. I think Oregon.
Now you're putting flowers on the grave.
Yeah. Yes.
You might as well just write your will now.
That's the lowest seed in making the tournament, and they're gonna beat Colorado. Oregon State takes that next game. Stanford meets them in the semifinals. Give me Stanford and USC in the final. USC takes it.
Okay.
I like I'll be a little different and give USC the props. Now,
I was just gonna say, like 2 seconds. Like, I think it's so sad that in the final year of the Pac-12, it's like the best conference.
Right. Yeah. But I think we'll see a majority of those teams in the tournament. So that'll be the fun part.
I agree.
Final segment of the day, we will go ahead and give us a guess the call moment. Jack Linder, our producer, has our clip ready to go. If you don't know this, we will play the clip of the call and you guys get to guess. Mind you, it can be men's or women's. Okay. So that's a preemptive idea that I got stumped on from our last Wednesday's show, but
all right,
we'll go ahead and go that. And then Jack, go for it.
Down to 7 seconds. You can see the time. Wittenberg. Oh, it's a long ways.
Oh, I got this. I got this.
Zion, I always thought, Zion, you're going to be good at this.
He'll be good at this.
I think you're going to be the
Zion, go for it.
All right. Now I'm trying to think of names.
Wittenberg.
Is it? Oh, okay. I'm not even going to say names.
Okay. I can give you guys a hint. Riley, do you have any idea?
I know the play. I would
love a hint.
So this call comes from a men's NCAA national championship in the 1980s. It's your first hint.
I think I might know the year. Let me.
Ooh, bonus points for the year.
All right. I believe this is 1983. Is that right?
Yes.
And it is NC State beating Houston in the national championship. The long shot that missed, the guy that came and tipped it in at the buzzer.
Wow.
What's his name?
Lorenzo Charles.
Thank you.
Let's go.
That is crazy.
Woo!
And
I just used the context clues. He said 7 seconds, 4 from the basket, and I was like, I think I know what this is.
Yeah.
All right, rounding out our episode, we have a shot clock segment.
I got you.
We got 30 seconds to say whatever we want. You know what? Let's give the host number one seed here. And we'll go first. We'll go first. All right.
In 3, 2, 1, go.
So this Big Ten first team is just so weird to me, how you can have 10 players on it. I mean, it's weird. It's weird. I don't like it. Just go back to the 5. I mean, I guess you have to give credit to those great performers, but that's why you have that competitiveness to get that first team, second team, third team, whatever. I think you go back to a 5-person format. It's too confusing. But Sarah Scalia should have definitely made it either way.
Oh, got the shot off. Real quick, I'll offer a little bit of something on this. I do agree with you in some sense. I feel like making it 10 players kind of like discounts the way that like the people that work like the hardest do to get on that team. I feel like making it 10, I don't know. I feel like that doesn't allow for the people that have played the best all season, have worked so hard for it to really be in their glory.
It's a little less prestigious, in my opinion. Riley, do you want to go next?
Yes.
I can
go next.
Riley Woodall, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen.
Jack timing him here in 3, 2, 1. Let's get it.
So I want to talk about the Cody McMahon tech on Caitlin Clark. Officials, stop babying good players. I'm tired of all the whining every time a call doesn't go her way and the refs give it to her a lot. First of all, she's a phenomenal player. You don't need to be doing that. Second, there's no place for whining in any sports. Just play the game. That's not to say you can't argue or disagree with the call. Lastly, this is for Caitlin Clark. Seriously think about the next time you are going to whine about a call, because there are so many little girls who look up to you, and the message you're sending when you do something like that is you can act like a toddler when you don't get what you want, and adults and parents will bend to your will. That is not how life works, and that's just facts. By the way, P.S., I know I ran out of time. Here's the deal. Gus Johnson, who is I love so much, and he's the reason that I want to pursue play-by-play. He said it best on the broadcast. Oh, come on now. That's not a technical.
Riley, you have me wanting to run through a freaking brick wall now, dude.
It just infuriates me so much.
I was down in Maryland, and I just saw that play on Twitter, and I was like, what are we doing here? How is that a tech?
It's also just a silly play to break the record on.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, I wish it could have been done better. But anyway, Zion, you round us out. We'll go ahead. Jack,
right.
Give us a timer. 3, 2, 1, and here we go.
Put some respect on South Carolina, please. Please. I saw a poll recently. The coaches voted on who were some of the best X's and O coaches, and Dawn Staley only got 2 votes. That doesn't make sense. Somehow they don't have she's not a great X and O coach. Somehow they don't have the SEC Player of the Year, the SEC Freshman of the Year, 6th Woman of the Year, and they only had 1 player, Camila Cardosa, on the SEC first team. So guys, this must be the luckiest 29-0 team in the history of sports, because nobody on their team is great apparently. Their coach isn't that great, but somehow they won every game.
And South Carolina didn't return a single player.
Nope, not one.
Their starting 5 last season. So, which is insane. Zion, I agree with you 100%.
This is a team that's going to win the national championship. That's just the way it is.
I like that pick. Folks, that's going to do it for us here in the studio of Indiana University, Bloomington. We might have a week off due to spring break. Spring break is next week, but we will be active on our social media platforms, letting you know if we have any sort of content or episode coming your way. Zion, Riley, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks to Jack Leonard behind the computer and our producer. Folks, we'll see you next time. Be safe and God bless.